Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the wrath of God. Now, for many, this can be ominous, scary, and confusing. How about you? Are you scared? Are you confused? Well, if you are, I hope today we can help you with that as we look at the wrath of God. The purpose of our Blessed Hope Ministries is to help you read, understand, and apply the book of Revelation in your life, to give you hope, to encourage you, and to help you understand that salvation is found only by putting your faith in Jesus Christ. Before we get started, I'd just encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you will be informed of future videos when they're posted. Now, when we look at the wrath of God, there's some good news for Christians. We're not going to go through it if we're alive at the time, and we'll look more closely at that as we go along. So the wrath of God, what is it? What it is not, and when will it happen? We're going to address these questions in the next few minutes. But first I want to go over a chart that maybe you've seen in a previous video. It's the locations where John received the visions in Revelation. Now, the first one was on the island of Patmos, and you can see the scripture references there. There's where he saw the glorified Jesus and received the letters to the 7 churches. And then he was taken to heaven, and I believe he received 2 major visions there. One was the scroll sealed with 7 seals and the trumpets, and then the other was what I call the kingdom battle. It's the battle between God and his forces, Satan and his forces, and of course God wins. And that ends with the bowls. And then he was taken into the wilderness to see the destiny of God's enemies, and then on the mountaintop to see the destiny of God's people, the church. Now, when we put these on a timeline, the first one really isn't on the timeline because it was just a vision of Jesus and the letters. But then he is taken to heaven and given some information. You see the arrows there because I believe that this vision in heaven was actually 2 separate visions that happened during the same period of time. And because of that, I put this red line down because the first vision ends with the trumpets and the second vision ends with the bowls. Now, some put these being sequential on the timeline. I believe they are parallel, describing the same wrath of God at the same time from a different perspective. So let's look at the timeline again. Don't be confused by all the words. You know, there's this final 7-year period following a treaty that I believe the Antichrist will make with Israel and other nations. The first 3.5 years will be relatively peaceful, recovery from war, and the Antichrist will be consolidating his influence. Then he will, in the midpoint, desecrate the temple in Jerusalem, setting himself up not only as the king of the world, but as the false Messiah. The final 3.5 years, the Bible calls the time of great tribulation. Do not believe this is the wrath of God. It is the wrath of Satan poured out on the church for 3.5 years. Then at the end of the 7 years, Jesus comes again, takes the church to heaven, and then pours out his wrath on the world. And then it follows the rest of the items on the timeline. So today we're going to focus on the wrath of God, which I believe is poured out on the unbelieving world following the rapture and the second coming. And it will be horrific. So the wrath of God, what is it? It's God's judgment on the unbelieving world. What it is not the persecution of the church that Satan will do during the final 3.5 years. That's the wrath of Satan on the church. And when will it happen? It will happen after the second coming of Jesus Christ and the rapture of the church. Now, we read about this period of time in the Old Testament. A day of wrath is coming. In Isaiah 2:17, it says, "The pride of mankind will be brought low, and human loftiness will be humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted on that day." And a few verses later it says, in verse 21, "They will go into the caves of the rocks and the crevices in the cliffs, away from the terror of the Lord and from his majestic splendor when he rises to terrify the earth. And I want you to remember those words because we're going to read them again in Revelation. Something terrible is going to happen. Now, I want to just for a second set up the comparison between Matthew 24 and Revelation 6. Matthew 24 contains the teaching of Jesus about events leading up to his coming and what will happen after that. And then in Revelation 6, we have the seals, which I believe are parallel. They describe deception, famine, wars and famine, earthquakes, persecution, and martyrdom, and then the second coming. Both of these passages describe the second coming and what follows the second coming. So let's take a look. In Matthew 24, after he's talked about a lot of events, it says, immediately after the distress of those days, which was the persecution and martyrdom of Christians, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. The sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. So here we have the celestial events that will occur just before his coming. And when the people see him, they will mourn. And we're going to see, we saw in Isaiah, and we're going to see in Revelation, that they actually hide in the crevices and the cliffs and the caves. And then it says here, he sends the angels out to rapture the church, to get the church. Now, when we look at the parallel passage in Revelation, in the seals, it says, then I saw him open the sixth seal. The violent earthquake occurred. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of hair. The entire moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a high wind. And this is the same celestial events we read about in Matthew 24. The sky will split apart like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the generals, the rich, the powerful, and every slave and free person, now get this, hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So here we have this tremendous parallel account of Jesus coming in the clouds, all the celestial signs, Jesus coming in the clouds, and in Isaiah and Matthew 24 and here in Revelation 6, people are hiding in terror because they know the wrath of the Lamb has come, which follows the second coming of Jesus when he will pour out his wrath on the unbelieving world. Now, we're going to take a look at the trumpets and the bowls. We're going to walk through them. There are a lot of them, but it's important for you to hear this. Just let this not only sink into your head, but into your heart as well, because this is emotional, what God is going to do to the unbelieving world. So let's look at the trumpets. Number one, a third of the earth and trees were burned up, and all the green grass. Can you imagine? The second trumpet, a third of the sea is turned to blood, destroying a third of the sea creatures and ships. The third trumpet, a third of the rivers and springs became poison, causing many to die. Pollution. The fourth trumpet, a third of the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, reducing daylight and night visibility. And then we have woe, 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 it says. And this is to indicate that the last three trumpets are more severe than the first four. The fifth trumpet is where demonic locusts are released from the bottomless pit to go out and sting and torment people for 5 months. Now remember, it's dark, the fourth trumpet, Now we have these demonic locusts that are stinging people all over the world for 5 months. People will want to die because of this, but they will not be able to. The sixth trumpet, a third of all humanity is killed in a battle, and I believe that this is the Battle of Armageddon, where Jesus returns with the armies of heaven to fight against the armies of the unbelieving world. And then finally, the seventh trumpet, Jesus inherits the kingdom, God's kingdom, bringing additional judgment and the opening of the heavenly temple. So there you have the trumpets. Now the bowls. And remember, I believe these are parallel accounts describing the same thing from a different perspective. The first bowl, painful sores afflict those who bear the mark of the beast. The second bowl, the sea turns to blood, killing marine life. We read that. The third bowl, rivers and springs turn to blood, affirming God's righteous judgment. The same thing happened in the third trumpet. The fourth bowl, the sun scorches people with intense heat, yet they refuse to repent. The fifth, darkness engulfs the beast kingdom, causing agony and despair. Remember, this is when in darkness the locusts are released, causing agony and despair, and no one can die. The sixth bowl, the Euphrates River dries up, preparing the way for this huge army to come to fight the battle at Armageddon, which is a valley in northern Israel, the same as the sixth trumpet. And then the seventh bowl, a devastating earthquake. Remember, in the seventh trumpet, Jesus is declared king, and there's additional judgments. Here it describes them. A devastating earthquake and hailstorms signal the completion of God's wrath. It even says that the hailstones are 100 pounds. It's going to kill some people. Well, there you have a quick view of God's wrath. I have taught this to people, and I've looked out in the audience and seen people weeping after hearing about what's going to happen to the unbelieving world. We, if whatever Christians are alive, will not have to experience it, and we should be grateful that we are spared from God's wrath. However, I believe it should motivate us to share the good news of Jesus Christ with as many people as possible. So this often raises a question. How could a loving God do such a thing? Well, God is not only perfectly loving, He is perfectly just. In Psalm 9, verses 7 and 8, it says, "But the Lord sits enthroned forever. He has established His throne for judgment, and He judges the world with righteousness," which means right. He's right in doing so. He executes judgment on the nations with fairness. He is perfectly loving and perfectly fair. And people need to know that it's a choice. Everyone has a choice. It says in Romans 6:23 that the wages or the penalty of sin is death. Now, after the second coming of Jesus, those non-Christians who are alive will experience His wrath, but eventually all people who reject Jesus will experience judgment and spend eternity separated from God in an eternal hell. People must know the consequences for rejecting Jesus Christ. Now, the wrath is certain, and we have relief as believers in Jesus that we will not experience it if we're alive, but we have grief for others who do not know Jesus, who are alive at that time, who will experience God's wrath on the world. Let's all be committed to sharing the good news of Jesus with others around us. I want to thank you for your kind attention today. There's a final slide that includes a QR code that you can scan and order my book on Revelation entitled Our Blessed Hope. It would be my honor if you would do so. And if you do purchase the book and read it, I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the book. And also there's a website you can go to learn more about Our Blessed Hope, and my email address. I would love to hear from you. I look forward to going through this journey of Revelation with you. I'll be posting future videos walking through the book. And until then, may the Lord richly bless you.